Greetings. It's a bit of a strange one, this video, so I think I need to give you a bit of a backstory to this. Things are revealed when you meditate, and such is how this video has come about. I was thinking, well, I wasn't actually thinking, I was meditating, and I basically got this image of the checkerboard. Then the chess pieces were shown to me. And this is where your individual life path will come into this. Things that you don't think of every day, but they're sort of stuck in your mind. And such was the case with this sketch by Fry and Laurie on language. I'll put the link in the description. It's quite an amusing sketch. You've got Stephen Fry, who's this academic, and he's talking about language, comes across as rather eccentric. He's not understood by everybody. Hugh Laurie plays the part of basically a chat show host. And it's sort of quite apparent with the questions that he's not keeping up. He's not understanding. There's a line in there, by demagoguery you mean, and he says, by demagoguery I mean demagoguery, and Hugh Laurie then says, I thought so. So it's sort of a bluff. It's that sort of putting on the pretense, a mask being shown in there. But getting to the point, the line in that sketch is when Stephen Fry says there's chess and there's a game of chess. And that stuck in my mind, and that sort of came back when I had these images of chess pieces come into my mind in this meditation. So, what do we do with this? What is this showing me? So I just sit with this, and this just sort of all sort of came. So before we look at chess, we're going to not look at chess. This will make sense. So let's take, for example, nature. We'll be the observer to nature. So we'll pick two things as an overall example. You've got the giraffe. Now, it sees from a higher perspective than most other animals. It doesn't really have any predators except where man has interfered and caused an imbalance, so they are starting to be attacked by lions. This information obviously comes from the internet, but I'm just using it as an illustration. So basically, if we look at the giraffe, it has a huge advantage in many ways that it can get to a food source, i.e. leaves and things off the trees that most other animals cannot get. But at the same time, it's a balance, because it will depend on how many trees and the abundance of that food source and how far that giraffe has got to go. Now, something else the giraffe shows in all of this, and it's partly with its spiritual meaning, the giraffe has to be decisive in its actions. If it was indecisive and its left leg wanted to go one way and the right leg wanted to go the other, it would be a complete disaster. The indecision would be a split, and for a giraffe to do the splits can be fatal. It can become a target. The young are very vulnerable when they are first born, and there's that subconscious coming through where the giraffe instinctively knows to stand up and be upright straight away. Bring the children unto me. That sort of intuitive knowing before you've even had any experiences being shown there. Likewise, with nature, you've got the balance. You've got the hyena, the pack animal. Its advantage is balanced by its disadvantage of the short back legs. So it has to adapt and survive and in its environment. Nature is kept in this balance. Now we go to the other way. We'll look at the opposite of that. You've got the chessboard, the checkerboard. This would be an interesting one for fact checkers. They're basically, I saw one the other day, and the fact checker was Reuters and a news agency. I thought I'll say no more. But let's look at this checkerboard here. First thing to notice, you've got the black and white. You're seeing things in black and white. You've got squares. Nature doesn't work in straight lines. Nature works in flowing and curves. But now you've moved into a man-made world of the checkerboard. So that's the first thing to notice with this, and you're being shown things in black and white. Now you have a perfect example with a chessboard, what you can do here. Now you're invited by this game of life, to pick a side. Do you want to be the white pieces or the black pieces? Or you can just be the observer and stay neutral to it all. You'll notice also, and this should become apparent as well, if you pick a side, you have a mirror. Now if we are all one, and we are fractalized pieces of one, chess pieces in this case, you're actually opposing yourself. You've created a situation where, by picking a side where you have an opposition that has actually got equal power, equal number of pieces and equal power to you. Something else with chess, we can talk about the individual pieces and we could talk about their moves. Now keep in mind, we're in an unnatural world of squares. These pieces have set moves, set as in S-E-T-T. Set and Horus. Set is always portrayed as the darkness, the evil. So, and connected with earth, hell on earth. So you have set moves on a chessboard. So you can learn these moves of these pieces. Now you have knowledge, but you don't have the experience to have the wisdom. It's also about anticipation. It's all about tactics. So if you start playing this game of chess, this game of life, there are set moves. So is it any wonder that, especially when you have an artificial eye that is watching and calculating from these set moves, you wonder why you get adverts for certain things? It's like, before I made this video, I wanted to find a picture and just have a read up on these chess pieces and things, and to put this all together. So of course, lo and behold, I'm now getting adverts for chess pieces coming through. So what else have we got here? You've got 64 squares, 8 by 8. 8 is infinity. It's expressed with the chess moves A to 8. So you're going from the alpha to the human. You're going from being one. You're infinite, like the number 8. There is a set orientation to this board. So the white square is always top left in this game. It's the same board used by checkers as well. And if I remember, I'll just talk about my sort of general perception of backgammon at the end of this, because it sort of comes in. So we'll look at these chess pieces now. The first thing, there's 8 of these per side, is the pawn. I see that as little I. It's part of the minor pieces. It's interesting, you've got major and minor in this, the same with astrology. Now this piece represents either the peasant or the pawn, the foot soldier, the little eye, you could say. This is just my interpretation of it. It can move one or initially two places. It can only attack diagonally or defend diagonally, so it forms a Y. It's asking why. It's the little eye. That forms the front row. This should start to become apparent. These are all aspects of you, and there's an astrological overlay to this, what is being revealed here. So we go to the back row. Let's start with the parameters of your world. You build your castle. Now, the rook or castle, it's also known as the tower. It's been known as the rector, the marquis, the count, or the earl, interestingly. It's your twin pillars. It's the limits, how far you can see to the left and to the right. It's a major piece. Now, I would say this represents, because of its movement, it is the fixed cross. Now we come down to the next piece, the knight. Now each side has a white knight and a black knight. You could express this as the dark knight of the soul, or the white knight, the hero. It's the only piece that can jump over other pieces, but it has a limitation. It can only move in an L shape, a 3 and 1 or a 1 and 3, which again I think is interesting. It references 3, which is represented with divine feminine. It also makes the sun wheel pattern in various orientations. Interestingly, with this piece, when you look at it, if we take the knight that is on the black square, whichever way it moves, whether it does 1 and 3, 3 and 1, whichever way it goes onto a white square, and it forms an octagon in its shape. It is expressing an 8. It is expressing the sun wheel. That's a minor piece worth 3 points in chess. The pawn is worth 1 point. The rook is worth 5. It's part of the major. The final minor is the bishop. Notice where the bishops sit. Again, you have a dark square and a light square. Now these can only move diagonally. You've got one to the side of the queen, one to the side of the king. They're all aspects. The rook, the knight, and the bishop, they're all aspects of your twin serpents. The knowledge of good and evil. They're whispering into the queen's ear, whispering into the king's ear. The bishop on the black square can only move diagonally on the black squares as far as the limits of the board. But it can't obviously jump over something if there's something in the way. What's also interesting about this, now I would say this represents the mutable cross. It's worth 3 points. What's also interesting in this bishop, you've got emotion, you've got Pisces, you've got the Babylonian fish hats like the Pope wears, the black Pope, the white Pope, depending on which square it's on, and of course you've got 4. You'll notice also the knight with the 4, the 2 opposing sides. You have 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, the 4 pillars of the earth. Now we come to the most powerful piece on the board, the Queen. She's a major player. She's worth 9 points. I would say she represents, because of this crown she wears, the cardinal cross. Interestingly, with all these pieces, they generally seem to have 3 sort of levels to their sort of base, like 3 steps up, 3 degrees being expressed there perhaps. I'm not saying this is what it is, I'm saying this is my interpretation of what I'm seeing in this. And finally, worth an infinite amount of points, is the king. He's a major player, but he can only move 1 square in each direction, unlike the queen, which is only limited by the board itself. I would say what you are being shown here is the conscious and the subconscious, the divine masculine, the divine feminine. The real power is with the queen, but they work together. Now, if you enter into this game, this unnatural man-made game, you're going to have an opposition. So it's better to be the observer. Let things flow, let things just come to you. And that is only through meditation. Now, another interpretation using the same board would be checkers or drafts, if you are drafted into it, and again you're picking a side. But the pieces all now have an equal value. Interestingly, I forgot to mention as well, if the pawn can make it to the other side, it can be raised up to any position except the king. But it could become a castle or a rook or a bishop. It has an elevated status if it can cross to the other side, see from the other perspective. This is what I'm saying it is showing. Look at the spiritual meaning, the alchemical, the astrological, all these. Not just this, but all games, all board games, they are all games of life. They are all expressing something. I'm not going to talk about the origins of this because I don't know the origins. It depends on what I look at, and what I look at will be on the web. So it depends what source. Some things are saying these things come from Persia, some from Egypt. Here we go again. But what is Egypt? Are we talking about the physical location? Are we talking about a concept? Are we talking about, in the sense of Egypt represents the material world? This represents the material world. You've got set moves. But it is still showing you something. It is still showing you you have a mirror. It's showing you you have an opposition. It's showing you have the option. You can pick a side. You can stay neutral to it. You can just observe it. When you look at these grand masters, they might take a long time before they will make a move. They do not react. They weigh things up. They anticipate. They look at every situation. They weigh up all the possibilities. In many aspects, what you are doing, you are being God when you are responsible for every player on this side of the board. Ultimately, you are responsible for the outcome of this. How you think and what you plan based on your knowledge and experience will also determine where you end up as the winner or the loser. Or whether it is a draw or a checkmate. That's the other thing. The game is not about the king being killed. It is just the king being contained within one square. The restriction, the constriction of man. This is God in human form being shown here. But chess, look at what chess is itself, C-H-E-S-S. When you see H for human, the energy in 2 spirits, notice it's a singular C, so it's referencing a single eye, your spiritual eye. The 2 eyes are the eyes of the deceiver. Also, when your attention is fully on this, you're oblivious to the natural world. That is also being showing in this. And also, when you get into the Grand Master levels, you'll notice they always have a clock. So it is subject to set moves, and it is subject to time. So just a few little thoughts on this. And as much as anything else, a sort of glimpse into what I've been shown based on an individual path, because how would anybody else have linked Chess and Fry and Laurie sketches together? And this is the thing, there is individual paths to all of us. It is going to come from experience of life, be it good or bad, whatever sticks in your mind, whatever comes back into your mind. But don't try and think it, just let it come. The only way to do that is to still the body and still the mind, go into meditation. Let the images, or however it is shown to you, just come to you. Don't think them, don't try and chase them, because they disappear like shadows. But the more you are the observer, and the more you are in that stillness, the more that will be shown to you. But we are walking two worlds. So now the orientation changes. You're in this, it's that centre line. There's your spiritual path being shown here. Stay neutral as the observer. Just pass through this. Don't pick a side. Because if you pick a side, you're going to have an opposition. You want to make the journey as simple and as smooth for yourself. That is down to you. It has always been about you. It'll always be about you. It is your individual journey. We can only help each other and guide each other and give each other pointers from our own personal perspectives and our own experiences and our own knowledge. It's when we all put it together. And this is something else. If everything is all together, nobody's picking a side, it remains peaceful. But one of these two is encouraged to make the first move, which is then countered by the opposition side. And then the battle ensues within this checkerboard, because you're seeing things purely in black and white. Us versus them. But the answer would seem to be right across the middle. Moving to the right, becoming righteous, is another way of expressing it. But you can play drafts, you can be drafted in, you can be checked, you can fact check whatever you want. It doesn't make it true or untrue. It all comes down to personal experience, sharing those experiences with the intent that it's going to help another, which is really what these videos are all about. So, little sort of brief sort of window into how my experience of creating these videos comes, the interpretations and things, and it is all down to meditation with this one. It can be inspired by others as well, because ultimately we are all part of one. So a word would be something like the word I heard yesterday, paracetamol. You just say it. And you play with the frequency, you play with the sound. So paracetamol, let's break it down. Let's see what else we can get out of it. Paracetamol. So you've got set in there, a mole, I hear a mole, parasite, eye mole. Well, it's a parasite going into your spiritual eye. It's a mole. It's a cancerous parasite. Because it comes from a petrochemical industry offshoot. It's not actually, like everything else synthetic, it is not good for you because it is not natural. The hidden gender may not be apparent as to where that is going to lead, but it will lead somewhere. These are all things to keep in mind. See both sides. So, I think we'll leave that there. I think we have hopefully sown some seeds, because when it is sown, it is spiritually owned. Spiritually owned is not like a possession in the material sense. Spiritually owned is wisdom. From knowledge and experience, things you put together from the two. The electromagnetic universe that is within you. The mind, the gut feeling, the heart in perfect alignment. Be upright. Notice also, you're going from A to H, that's 8. Alpha and Omega, so we want to go on to O, that's a 7. Well, that's the 7 chakras to go from A to O. But also what comes into it in numerology as well, if you want to then go from H to 26, that's 18. 8 and 1 is 9, so from a 6 to a 9. Flip the script, go from a birth from below to a birth from above. So the 6 becomes the 9, but in the completion of a 7. And in between the 7 and that 9, of course, is the 8, because you are infinite, infinite. Everlasting and eternal. This is just an experience in this game of life. Whether you want to play it or not is entirely up to you. But seeing as we're here, I think it's worth playing in many ways, but not in the way, not with these set moves. It's all about creative, it's all about imaginative. You're dealing with something that is artificial, synthetic. It only knows set moves. It can only anticipate set moves. As you spiritually grow and you leave behind the material world and the things that once were of interest to you, it throws the AI into a sort of confusion because it can't predict what you're going to do next, which is part of this game. It's all a big Cluedo, but you know who is behind this. And hopefully you know how to get out of it and what is going to get you out of it. If you're not sure, reflect on it. Look in the mirror. Take a good long look. All the answers are there. It is shown right back at you in the mirror. This reality is duality. It is all about mirrors.